I hope everyone was able to grab an index card and a writing utensil. If you are on Zoom, if you're able to grab a small piece of paper and a writing utensil, you don't need it quite yet, but you will need it eventually. I am the child of two clergy. My parents are, my father is a Quaker clerk, my mother is a United Church of Christ Reverend. So I grew up in both of those traditions. And I just moved to Louisville after graduating from Oberlin College with a degree in religion and gender, sexuality, and feminist studies. So this is kind of the crux of where all of my academics were, and also my passion projects. So I've only been in the role as outreach coordinator for a couple of months, but as Rachel said, I've been invited to ministerial meetings and also to some colleges as well to give some presentations. So I'm really thankful for being here. Glad you invited me. So the topic for this one, I'm going to be doing another one in a couple of weeks about the ballot initiative specifically. But this one is just kind of give you some background as to what reproductive justice is and why it's important for us to work on. So to ground us all, I wanted to start with the reproductive justice framework. Has anyone here heard of this phrase before? Yes. Do you know any of the 4 tenets?
Oh Lord, no.
I just wanted to see if there was anybody who might have known one.
I think I heard about it last week, but I forgot.
Do you want to take a guess at one of them?
No.
Anyone want to take a gamble? No? Okay. So the reproductive justice framework has 4 tenets. So it's the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, human right to have children, human right to not have children, and also the human right to parent the children that we have in safe and sustainable environments. So a lot of the time when people ask about the reproductive justice framework, most people will go, the right to have an abortion, which is partially true, it falls into that, but it's not just about that. It's about being able to have a holistic well-being for reproductive health care. The term was coined by a group of Black women in 1994 who met in Chicago. This group later formed the Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective in 1997. If you're familiar with the name Loretta Ross, she recently just won an award from MacArthur. She was one of the founding mothers of this movement. So while reproductive justice framework doesn't focus only on abortion, obviously that is one of the biggest talking points right now. So I have some quick facts for folks, just to kind of address some of the myths that people hear about it, but also to recognize what's really true. So having an abortion is often, for anti-abortionists, will often say that it's counter to being a parent, when in fact, almost 60%, I think the official number is like 59.8% of people who have had an abortion already have had 1 or more live births. They will also, yes.
Can we get like copies of that?
Yes. I've already sent the presentation to Rachel and Samantha, and so I'll make sure that you all have it as well. So another thing that you'll hear about sometimes in the news is called a late-term abortion. If you've been paying attention recently, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina recently wrote up a bill called the Protecting Pain-Capable Unborn Children from Late-Term Abortion Act, which, getting behind the science, that's not physically possible for a fetus to experience pain at the 15-week mark, which is where they're listing it. Late term in pregnancy is usually 41 weeks or after. So full term is 40 weeks, and beyond that is late term. But late term abortions, people will say, after the first trimester, it's only 8%. After 20 weeks, there's only a 1% of abortion, of all abortions. And that's usually because the fetus has been, there's no longer a heartbeat, the survivability out of the womb is slim to none, or the health of the person who's carrying the fetus, the person who's pregnant, is at detrimental risk. The third one, when I read this statistic, when I was doing the math, I was stunned about it being 42 times more dangerous to give birth and to have a legal abortion. So in the span of 2013 to 2018, the average maternal death rate for every 100,000 live births was 17.33. Whereas the average case fatality rate for every 100,000 abortions was 0.41. And in 2020, the maternal death rate jumped from the 17.33 in 2018, where it was actually, to 23.83 out of every 100,000. We don't have statistics for the last couple of years. The CDC releases information every November for 2 years back. So we'll get the 2020 statistics in late November this year for everything from that. But this is the for abortion counts, but also they have released more recently the statistics for the maternal mortality. And then the last one is about religious affiliation. So you'll often hear that religion is counter to getting an abortion. Religion is a secular, or not religion. Abortion is a secular issue. That's not true. After the 38% of abortion patients who don't have a religious affiliation, does anyone want to take a guess at who is the next highest proportion? You say evangelicals? Anyone else want to take a guess? Catholics? It is the Catholics at 24%. Protestants are at 17%, evangelicals are at 13%, and then the remaining 8% are other religious affiliations. And that was done, there isn't, I couldn't find more updated information, but that was back in 2014, done by the Guttmacher Institute, which if you don't know the Guttmacher Institute, definitely check them out. They have a bunch of the abortion statistics and such. So that brings me around to the question of what does this have to do with faith? Because that is a big question that I get asked when I talk about my role and all of the work that I do is, yeah, we understand why you're for this, but like, why do you say you're for it from a faith perspective? So the first one is that there is no set belief on when life begins. So some believe that life begins at conception or at the first heartbeat at 6 weeks. Some believe at viability, so that's about 22 to 24 weeks, or the quickening, which is an old school term for the feeling of the fetal movement for the first time. And then also there's the belief that it starts at the crowning or the first breath. This is drawn from Genesis 2:7. The Lord breathed into the creation that he had made, and out came a human being. This one is typically drawn on by Judaic traditions as well as the crowning or first breath. The second part that I always tell people is that caring for the vulnerable is Christ-like. So I pulled this quote from Matthew because it is something that I always draw on when I talked about justice work, caring for other people. Christ asked us to care for vulnerable people. Abortion restrictions disproportionately affect marginalized communities such as people of color, those in rural communities, and those who are low income. And we do harm to those people when we deny them autonomy and burden them with shame. And then the third one that I always lean on is that God calls us to be people of justice. These are two of my favorite biblical quotes. These are ones that I draw on for my work all the time. And we also know that justice work, it doesn't happen in silos. So this reproductive justice involves climate justice, it involves racial justice, it involves breaking down socioeconomic statuses and the oppression that comes in there. It involves sexual liberation. It involves being progressive and caring for those who work in fields for gender equality as well. So it embodies a whole other fight just outside and like not even just contained to what someone does when they get pregnant. So the reason why I had everybody grab a writing utensil and an index card is I want you to think about this for you as well. So we're going to do a little bit of a writing exercise. I'm not asking anybody to share this with anyone else. These are for you to reflect on and for you to keep to yourself. You don't have to tell me. You're welcome to if you want, but you don't have to. So either on one side and the other side, or however much you want to write. There are also extra index cards if you would like them. I want you to reflect on these two questions. In your faith community and family growing up, what did you learn about yourself and your body in regards to reproductive health? And then how have reproductive health care and reproductive justice affected your life journey? Oh, perfect. Yeah, that is right. All right, I'm going to set a 10-minute timer. And when that time is up, if we need a little bit more time, we'll see, we'll check in, but I want everyone to just kind of ask people to do this because one of the biggest, one of the things that I feel people benefit the most out of hearing these things are being able to express their own stories. Stories have a profound impact on other people. And while I'm not going to ask anybody to share theirs, I do want to share a story. So this picture was taken on April 17th, 2000. In this photo are my mother, my father, my older brother, Alex, and myself. And I've always loved this picture. My grandmother was a photographer because I can see on everybody's face how happy they were about this. My brother begged for a little sister, and then when I was about 3 years old, he decided he didn't want it anymore, but that's beside the point. But one thing that has never been a secret from me has also been the pain behind all of this. So my brother is about 5 years older than me. He was born in June 1995. And between those two pregnancies, my mom suffered 2 miscarriages. The first one happened in March 1998. She wasn't very far along in the pregnancy, and so it passed naturally. It was able to go by pretty easily physically. But then she had a second one in March 1999. She was a little bit further along in the pregnancy, and she was bedridden. My brother, who was 3, not quite 4 at that point, was always asking why mommy couldn't play with him. And after a week of waiting for it to expel naturally, my mom, wanting to avoid the risk of infection, sepsis, and potentially death, went in for a dilation and curettage, D&C. At the time that my mom did this, my parents were actually both very devout Catholics. And they also lived in Brownsville, Texas, which, if anyone knows where that is, which I'd be surprised if you do, it is the very southern tip of Texas. My house was 2 miles away from the border. The hospital where my mom is pictured in this, and also where she received her D&C, was only 4 miles away from the border. And what's always struck me about this photo is that some 20 years on, the procedure that saved my mom's life is now illegal. It would put my mother behind bars. So when people ask me why I do this work, I tell them that without abortion, I wouldn't be here today. My mom would have either suffered from infection and sepsis and death, or it would have taken a lot longer for her to be able to expel naturally and then get pregnant again. Abortion access, to me, saves lives and allows already existing children to keep their parents. And I'm thankful for this because I know that God was responsible for giving my mom that kind of bodily autonomy. I know that I've always believed in the God shapes you in your mother's womb. And also God has that plan of, this wasn't the right time, but I'm going to help you with this so that the next time can be the right time. And I also tell people when they ask me why I do this from a faith perspective, is that politicians are not keeping their faith They're not keeping themselves from invoking God's name in their legislative oppression against people like my mother. So for me, it's a moral duty to use my faith as a source of love and liberation. And another passage that I draw on is from the book of Mark, chapter 5. Many people will know it as the story of the hemorrhaging woman, where she touches Jesus' cloak. She's cured of her ailment, and Jesus says to her, "Your faith has made you well." Justice is the work of healing trauma. And Jesus, as that divine physician, calls us to be healers. And so to not do this justice work is to go against all that we have been taught to do by Jesus. And that is why, for me, and for so many other people, this issue cannot go by without our voices. That being said, that is all of the stuff that I have for you. Are there any questions, comments, dialogue?
I think we're gonna pause or stop the recording.
Yes.